Coin.
There's JB.
Oh my gosh.
There's
Guys
the
mind if,
man of the hour.
You guys mind if I come on in for a minute?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
please.
Twist my arm,
The
will ya?
man, JB. I will even get up. Then you're gonna need us back.
Not yet. Not. I'm going to do an interview for a while. So.
All right. This
Okay, well, we'll get out of your way.
JB for an interview.
We're passing the
Now
wine.
the knowledge will be coming your way.
How about that?
Y'all be good.
The BS artist.
It's all yours,
What do
JB.
you mean?
Thank you.
That's all we did. How
Hey,
come-
at least we did not get YouTube to shut us down. So hopefully we did right.
Good morning, Coin Op. How are we? Hey, I just got out of a seminar, and the gentleman that presented the seminar was gracious enough to give us some of his time to talk about a little-known thing about the North Carolina Gold Rush. Yes, you heard me correctly. We're going to talk about the North Carolina Gold Rush. We're going to talk about the Charlotte Mint. We're going to talk about the very first gold rush in American history was not California. Good morning, AZ. I know I'm late, but I was getting some knowledge. AC. So I wasn't playing around. I was actually in a seminar. So here's what I've got for you guys. I've got a gentleman that's going to come on camera with me. His name is Mr. Stephen Petty. He's the president of the Columbus, Ohio Coin Club. And he just gave about an hour seminar on the Charlotte Mint, the history of the gold rush in North Carolina. Again, you heard that right, the gold rush in North Carolina. And we're going to talk about some things with the Charlotte Mint. He has an entire collection here. That's why it pays to make this trip every year. He has an entire collection of the $2.50 gold pieces from the Charlotte Mint. I took a bunch of pictures. I'll try and get some of those to you guys. But it is an absolute amazing sight to see an entire collection of $2.50 gold pieces from the Charlotte Mint. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Mr. Petty in. Sir, how are you?
Great. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. It's a true honor not only to have sat in your seminar, but to listen to the history that you've compiled. I know a lot of Coin Op members are big into not only coin collecting, but our history and the history of our country. One of the things that struck me right off the bat was, when you said the first gold rush in America was not California. It was good old North Carolina, the Hickory State. I never would have, if somebody would have asked me that, I would have gotten that wrong. I never would have guessed that in a million years. Can you talk a little bit about the Reed family and the discovery that Conrad Reed made in a little creek near Courtesy, North Carolina?
Yeah, it's most people don't realize the very first gold rush was in North Carolina, and in fact, North Carolina was known as the Golden State until the California Gold Rush. So they kind of took the name away from North Carolina. But it started in 1799 when Conrad Reed, who was the son of a Hessian draft dodger, basically, skipped church on a Sunday and was fishing, and he saw this shiny golden rock. Took it home. It was about the size of a football, and it weighed about 17 pounds, and worth several $100,000 today. And they didn't know what it was. They took it to jeweler. They didn't know what it was, and so it served as a doorstop for 3 years.
What?
And then eventually the father took it to another jeweler who gave him $3.50 for it, even though it was worth $3,000 at the time. And so therein begins the modern, early gold rush in North Carolina.
It's funny that you say that because a friend of mine, he actually uses a 100-ounce silver bar as a doorstop, and he's like, if somebody ever breaks in, they're never going to guess that the doorstop right there is 100 ounces of silver. So it's funny that back in the 1800s, he was using this football-sized gold nugget as a doorstop getting kicked around, exposed to the elements. That's just amazing to me, because who would have thought that gold would have been discovered in North Carolina amongst just everyday people here? Well, I can imagine back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, nobody would have expected gold coming out of North Carolina. It just wasn't a common thing, I would imagine.
No, and in fact, the reason I showed in the presentation some pictures of the actual creek is that it's just sort of a flat, meandering. You would think that there was nuggets being drawn into a creek. It would be a roaring, rushing creek, and this thing looks pretty placid. And but yet, and not only that, they found a 17-pound nugget in that creek, but later on they found a 28-pound nugget in that creek.
Wow. And
they called it the potato patch.
The potato patch. A football-sized nugget. I mean, if any of you have ever held a football in your hands, you can get a visualization of just how big that is. I can't imagine what the weight was.
Yeah, it was 17 pounds.
17 pounds.
So you figure, I don't know what 17 times 16 is, but that's a lot of ounces.
That is a lot of ounces, everybody. So little Conrad decided to skip church. Sure, his parents weren't too happy. Finds the nugget. And then an interesting story happens after the nugget sat as a doorstep for a few years. Mr. Reed decided to go to a jeweler. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, in 1802 or so, he took it to a jeweler in Fayetteville, I believe, and the jeweler confirmed it was gold, and he was offered $3.50 for it. At that time, it was worth $3,600. Today, it's worth almost $500,000. And Mr. Reed thought, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty fair because 50 cents was a day's wages back then, or so, and so $3.50 was a week's wages. So he took $3.50, but then he found out he'd been kind of duped, and he went back, and we don't know for sure, but we know he got more money. We don't know if it was $3,000 or so or $1,000, but he did get some more money, and it caused him then to open mining operations on his property.
So he went back to the jeweler and he said, "Okay, you got one over on me. You're going to give me some cash, whether you like it or not," because he was a German mercenary. So I imagine he was a tough guy.
Right. I mean, the interesting story is they were all kind of hiding out in western North Carolina because he fought with the British against the Americans, and then he was in South Carolina and deserted and hid out in western North Carolina, what is now western North Carolina.
Sounds like he kind of fell in love with the United States.
Yeah, and he was not interested in being a soldier anymore. And so, and there were several German families there. I suspect there were others like him, and some Scottish families. So they were out there kind of hiding out and farming. And his son skipped, like we said earlier, Sunday school and church, and found this nugget that I always kidded. I don't know if Conrad got anything out of the nugget, but his dad did.
I'm sure Conrad probably got a, back then maybe a new fishing pole or something. I'm sure back then his dad kind of took care of him. So John Reed then, while simultaneously being a farmer, he didn't just give up on farming. He decides to open up mining operations.
Right, because not only were there many nuggets in the area, but it turns out that there was, in the hard rock below the surface, there were seams with a mineral that contained a lot of gold. And so that was discovered in the early 1800s. And so he opened a mine along with two of his friends. And they hard rock mined that mine until well after his death in the late 1800s.
And hard rock mining is hard. I mean,
Yeah.
People don't even do that today because it's so cost expensive. And
oh yeah, and they were using hand drills and picks. And in fact, I showed some pictures of some of the miners, and they are not overweight gentlemen by any stretch. And best for the best. So.
Absolutely not. I don't know if you guys can see that picture. Those are actual miners in North Carolina.
They're hand mining or using hands, but the next one over, down below, there's pictures of the hard rock miners, and they obviously, that was tough work.
That's just amazing. So John Reed continues to mine in the potato patch. He expands his empire, and then you kind of alluded to it a moment ago. One of the slaves that was one of the laborers finds a 28-pound gold nugget.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I mean, it's interesting. They called it the potato patch. So they obviously were finding these gold nuggets out there. He had an 80-acre farm at that time,
And this is in North Carolina, y'all. This is I had to put the y'all in there because we're talking about North Carolina. This is in North Carolina by the Charlotte area, a little bit north of it, near the Virginia border.
It's actually about 25 miles northeast. So you'd think it'd be maybe out west more towards the mountains.
Right.
But there was gold found in almost all the counties for I'll call it the western half of North Carolina or so.
Which is so interesting because if we had just met on the street and you said, "Did you know that gold was ever found in North Carolina?" I would have said, "How? There's no possible way," because of, like you're saying, the meandering creeks, the swamps, it's just not conducive to the terrain we see in California, Alaska, Montana, Arizona. You would never think that there's gold right under our feet, a couple states away here in North Carolina.
Yeah, and it's old geology, so you know.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said in the presentation, it was known as a golden state throughout the 1800s because it would, on GDP after farming, it was the second highest income source for North Carolinians was gold.
So the early 1800s, when you think back to North Carolina in the early 1800s, and you think about the laborers and the plantations and all that stuff, you know that North Carolina was famous for barley, rye, tobacco, all kinds of agricultural corn type products, right? But what we learned today is that in those early 1800s, so while farming was number one, number two was gold. That's just astonishing to think of, again, in North Carolina. But here we go. Here that brings together. Gold was so prevalent in the Old North State that from 1804 to 1828, all domestic gold coins coined by the United States, all the gold came from North Carolina. Let me say that again. From 1804 to 1828, any gold coin made in the United States was from gold from North Carolina. That is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, that would be other than coins that obviously they melted gold from foreign coins, but domestic produced gold was all from North Carolina.
Wow. And so from 1800 until the Civil War, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, gold mining was the second ranked industry. So that inlaid a problem because back then they didn't have SUVs and trains and rigs and all that stuff. So if you got this gold in North Carolina, where's the nearest mint?
It's in Philadelphia.
The Philadelphia Mint. And to get that gold to Philadelphia, they would have had to either stagecoach it or taken it by horse or...
Right, it was a long, dangerous trip, and it was expensive if you did stagecoach. So, and then the other problem is that local jewelers would charge them 10% to do it. So the people producing the gold felt like they were getting ripped off. They didn't have good options.
Interesting. So that brought us to the 1830s, and a gentleman named Templeton Reed out of Georgia. He was a silversmith, and I believe he was an expert with machinists and whatnot. So he began an assay office in Gainesville, Georgia.
Correct.
Right.
And also minting these Templeton coins. They only lasted from 1830 to 1831. We'll talk about why.
Okay. And then after 1830, a gentleman named Christopher Beckler came in as a German assayer.
Right, and many people they've probably heard of the Templeton coins. They may have heard of the Bachelor coins. They're both pretty rare numismatically today.
Yeah, well, I'll try to show you guys a picture in a moment. The amazing thing about Christopher Beckler, he was also a machinist.
Correct.
Yep, and very talented, very skilled. So he was making firearms.
Correct. He was German, good machinist. He'd come to this country in 1830, so by 1832 he was
up and running,
solving problems.
And what that not only speaks to just the amazing ingenuity of many of the immigrants that came to our country, that basically built our country, but if you think back in that time, the Civil War hadn't happened yet. So any firearms that were being made were for hunting and self-defense, or just the family firearms that people would have, which is incredible because if you think about the machinist skill it takes to make a firearm, it is not easy. It takes just amazing talent back then and amazing ingenuity to get all the breech loading parts and movable parts.
And we didn't have steam or any powered systems. The coin presses weren't steam driven until 1835. So
Wow.
this is all manually driven machining. I mean, it's
Manual
intensive
labor. That's manual labor. So the Beckler family begins to make coins, and he made $1. He made $2.50 and $5 gold coins.
Correct.
And from what I gathered from your presentation, he was an outstanding gentleman. His weights and purities were top notch. He was very honest.
Right. He came across as he only charged about 2 to 2.5% to refine and make coins out of their gold.
What I'm trying to show you guys now is the actual Beckler coins.
And people viewed him as one of the few very honest people. So he got a lot of the gold from people locally to both refine, assay, and make coins out of it. And now these coins are convenient for trade.
That's incredible. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. So he was well regarded and highly respected man. Well, then we move into the 1830s to the 1850s. Now, keep in mind, guys, the Charlotte Mint had not been created yet.
Correct.
So we're still.
It's created ultimately from 1835 to 1838. But
Okay.
Betzler's still doing his thing.
Betzler's doing his thing while the mint was being authorized and whatnot. Betzler coins from the 1831s to 1850s are very rare, very expensive. So while all of this was going on, Congress was debating on where to put a mint down in North Carolina, in North Carolina and Georgia.
And New Orleans.
So they, the Congress authorized for 3 mints, the Delonga, did I say that right?
DeLonga, yeah.
Delonga Mint in Georgia, New Orleans, and Charlotte, which is in Mecklenburg County. That was that order was signed by President Andrew Jackson. So they were supposed to start operations in 1838. And DeLonga and Charlotte were only going to mint gold coins because we all know New Orleans minted silver coins as well, like the Morgan dollar and stuff like that.
Correct. Both Charlotte and DeLonga were only authorized to produce gold coins, no silver.
Wow. Okay. So then we get into the actual mint construction. And when did construction of the mint actually start in Charlotte?
It really started, the authorization was in 1835, and the property was purchased in that time frame for about $1,500. A square block of the city was purchased for $1,500.
Wow.
And then the construction began in 1836. It was completed by 1837.
So now we're in 1837, and the mint is completed and mint operations begin.
Correct, but they weren't authorized to actually produce coins until 1838. So what they did, though, is they did assay. In other words, they would take gold in and they would refine it to get it to the right purity.
Okay.
And so they were taking gold in and returning monies back to the people who brought it in, but they weren't making coins yet.
So what was the first coin that the Charlotte Mint made?
The first coin they made was a $5 gold piece in 1838.
Wow, interesting. And then after that, the Charlotte Mint would do continue on with the $5. They would do $2.50, and they would eventually do a $1 gold coin.
Correct. They only made 3 denominations: $1, $2.50, and $5 pieces. They made the 5 and the 2.5 beginning in 1838. Interestingly enough, it had the old classic head design, big hair, from 38, 39. And what's really neat about that is the C for Charlotte is actually on the obverse underneath the bust. It might be hard to see. But for 38 and 39, it's actually on the obverse. And then when they go to the Liberty head, it's on the reverse under the tail feathers.
Yep. And then there's the Liberty head, and the mint mark is right here.
the first 2 years are really highly desired because of that unique design, and they only produced it for 2 years.
Interesting.
But the dollars weren't made until 1849, so it was almost 11 years later before they made a dollar.
Gotcha. Now, a gentleman had asked in the question and answer after a really amazing question. During your presentation, you had mentioned that there was a pair of $3 gold coin dies that were sent to the mint, but they were never used.
In 1854, yeah. Now, interesting, there was also a set sent to Dahlonega, where they made $3 gold pieces, but it was only for that year. Charlotte had the dies, but never made any coins that we know of.
And a gentleman asked, one of the gentlemen after the presentation asked, where are those dies at? Because that would be, as much as a gold coin from that time period is an amazing piece of history, an equally amazing piece of history is if we could get a hold of those dies.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. They could be in the museum there, but I didn't know the answer to that question.
Interesting. So we're on the hunt. So then we move into the actual mintages of the Charlotte gold coins. That's right. So this is an interesting story, and I, believe it or not, I totally believe the rumors. So the mint is chugging along. They're moving into the 1840s. They're starting to make coins. I believe, in 1838, 7,800 were minted. 1839, they're ramping up production up to 18,000. 1840, there are 12,000 coins minted. 1841, 10,000. Well, all of a sudden, in 1845, there are no coins minted from the Charlotte Mint. And that's because in 1844, something bad happened. Want to speak to that?
Yeah, they had a fire in the mint. It was rumored to have been started by students smoking in the basement, and they had a full fire suppression system, but it was never utilized. And so no, that's a big mystery, actually. But as a consequence of that, literally the whole mint burnt down.
And to me, why that sounds so logical as a rumor is if you got a bunch of kids down in the basement smoking cigars or smoking cigarettes or whatnot, they don't want anybody to know that they were there. So why would they activate a fire alarm system? Why would they activate a water system? They just wanted to get the heck out of there. So that makes a lot of sense that that's the reason for that rumor. And also keep in mind, guys, we're now moving into the 1840s. So here we have the 1840s. In just about 16 years or so, we're going to have the Civil War. So the Charlotte Mint burns down in 1844. They are back. They build back.
Right, and built during 1844, and it completed in October of 46. So they started. So they only had a little bit of the year left, and they started reminting. And so it turns out in 1846 that the mintage is very, very low, 4,800 or so pieces for the $2.50. And they called, historically, they've called that 1846 C Charlotte $2.50 piece the Southern Darling, because it was recognized as being very rare even back then.
What's amazing to me is if they only minted 4,800 coins in 1846, and there's only 105 that are graded.
Right.
You could imagine that there's not very many raw coins out there. I mean, I'm sure there's a few.
Sure.
But the survivability rate of the 1846 Charlotte $2.50 gold piece has got to be in the low 1, 2, or 3%.
Absolutely, it's probably all below 2%.
And that means that's incredibly rare. I mean, that means that if you were ever to get your hands on a Charlotte gold piece, if you get it from 1846. You literally have found yourself something amazing. And what I'm going to be able to show you here, it's amazing to be able to hold these pieces of history. I'm going to be able to share with you the 1838 Charlotte $2.50 gold piece right here live on YouTube. This is NGC graded AU55, which means it's an incredible grade. There you go, guys. There's the 1830.
See 1838. You can see the C mint mark if you look closely, kind of low the bust above the date. Kind of a unique design. You don't see the mint marks like that on many coins.
That's just incredible. And the reverse is the traditional $2.50 gold piece. Get that camera to focus. There we go.
Eagle's a little skinnier in the wings than the subsequent issues, but the Auvers has this full hair on the back. They call it glossy head. But it's,
And then we had the 1848 Charlotte. And here's where you'll see the mint mark moves to the obverse, or I'm sorry, the reverse. So here's the 1848, and you can see how the design has changed. And then on the reverse, you can see the eagle's very, very similar, but you can see that Charlotte mint mark right below the eagle. I hope you all can see that. I tell you guys, it's truly an honor to go to my right. Sorry about that. Did you guys get to see the coins?
they say no, so maybe we go to this one. Did they want you to go to the other one?
How about that? Guys, can you see that now? Cannot see it. Okay, hang on 1 second. Not sure why.
It's the glare.
Guys, can you see this coin now? We're not seeing anything. Good morning, by the way. Hi, Lisa. Nope.
That's all right.
Okay. Maybe it was here that you guys saw it first. Okay. So you can see the coin now, guys? All right, Rhonda. Hey, Rhonda. Good morning. So again, this is an 1848 Charlotte minted coin. No. Change my camera. Hold on.
Can't glare on that from the windows. for
Yeah.
some reason.
Now, good. Okay. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to try and play with this to get you a good, as best I can, because we're definitely having camera issues, which I apologize for. Too close. How's that?
That's all right.
I'm going to work on that while we finish our talk, guys, and I'll see if I can't fix it by the time we're done. So the Charlotte Mint continues to operate after it's rebuilt, and you can only see me. That's crazy. How about now? Can you see us both? I am way behind in chat. Okay, so the Charlotte Mint continues to operate from 1846 when it's rebuilt.
Right?
And then it continues to keep on minting. And then the Civil War happens in 1860.
Yeah, 1861.
And then the mint closes down very shortly after the Confederacy seized it.
Right. The Confederacy basically took over the mint in May 21st of 1861, and by October it was closed.
Okay. And so after October of 61, the mint is closed. Definitely would love to hear your thoughts on what happened after that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear what happened to that facility. From 1865 to 67, the federal troops occupied the mint for reconstruction. It continued to serve as an assay office. They didn't make coins. And it continued to operate as an assaying office until 1913. In fact, in 1873, the mint asked if they could start making coins again, and they were, that request was rejected. Interestingly, in World War I, which is in the early to mid-teens, it served as a Red Cross station, and then from 1917 to 1990, it was a Charlotte's Women's Club.
Can you please mention that there are foreign coin dealers too?
Yes, ma'am. I will.
Thank you.
And then It was scheduled in 1931 to be demolished, but a bunch of citizens purchased some land, and they moved it a couple of miles away. So it's not at its original site, but it's still there, at least the second version of it. And in 1936, it opened as a museum, and it continues in that function today.
That's outstanding. And funny thing about, I noticed in your presentation about Mr. Reed, you said he lived till age 88. Back then, people did not live until 88. That's a little bit on the upper tier, if you will, because the average life expectancy, I believe, back then was the 60s and 70s. So the fact that Mr. Reed lived, and farmed and gold mined until 88 was incredible. He left behind 9 children and 54 grandchildren. That is a big family from the Reed family. One of the things that I pointed out in the afterwards in the question and answers was when the Charlotte Mint closed down, there still needed to be coinage made. And last year when we introduced you to Patrick Hipple from the Osborne Mint, who is here this year, Patrick had some amazing stories about the history of the Osborne Mint and how they may have had a hand in helping out with some of the minting of coinage or maybe movage of coinage. I'm not quite sure. There's a lot of conjecture behind that. But what struck me by your presentation was the Kelly family,
Yes.
from Springfield, Ohio, ended up buying all the land off of the Reed family.
Correct. In 1896, they purchased the entire property, and they were out of Springfield, Ohio.
So I'm not from Ohio, but we're here in Cincinnati. About how far away from Cincinnati is Springfield?
Probably 30 miles at most.
So there was close.
Yeah.
And the Osborne Mint is, here in Cincinnati, and Springfield's there. So by pointing, bringing some of those dots together and trying to connect them, I know I'm doing I'm doing a stretch, but it's not uncommon to think that the Osborne Mint, the Kellys, the Reeds, the Charlotte Mint closing down in 1861. It's not uncommon to think that a lot of things happened here in the Cincinnati area, or close by Cincinnati. And that's why I wanted to close this with a couple of things that the Cincinnati, Ohio area has, just first off, this year's coin show is the 39th year, and the Sharonville Convention Center hosts the show.
Right. Cincinnati Coin Club is the host now, and they're doing a fantastic job.
Doing a great job, and as a dealer just walked by, there's foreign coins here, all kinds of historical coins. But this year we were given a real treat because Mr. Petty brought the entire. So we showed you 2 coins, $2.50 gold pieces from the Charlotte Mint. Mr. Petty brought the entire $2.50 gold pieces from the Charlotte Mint that were ever made. And that's, to me, when I looked at it, I was mesmerized. I literally could not believe what I was looking at as far as our history. And Mr. Petty had commented during the presentation, he kind of cheated because he, bought most of this collection all at once. And I fired right back at him. I said, if you're preserving history, you're not cheating. It's quite okay because obviously this is in the hands of somebody that loves our country, loves the history of our country, and wants to preserve that for the future generations. And so I wanted you guys to have a chance to meet Mr. Petty. I sat through his seminar just with my eyes wide open, learning more about our history. Again, I never would have thought that gold could be possibly found in North Carolina.
Yeah, it was our very first gold rush, and I think it's a fascinating story.
It is. It's an amazing story, and I really hope you guys in the YouTube Coin Op community enjoyed that story and enjoyed this talk with Mr. Petty. I know I'm blown away, so I'm very humbled and very thankful that you could come on with our viewers and share this And the beautiful thing about CoinOp subscribers is while we're live now, over 130,000 people will go back and watch this at some point, hopefully. So hopefully we can get the word out about North Carolina's history, about your collection. I didn't. I know we're here in Sharonville and whatnot, but I definitely wanted to ask about where you're at.
Yeah, I split time. My home is Columbus or Dublin, Ohio, and I'm president of CONA, the Columbus Area Numismatic Association. But I'm spoiled a little bit. I live 3 weeks a month in Florida and then 1 week a month in Ohio. And as you can well imagine, I probably spend a little more time in the winter in Florida.
Absolutely. So CoinOp, thank you guys very much. I will work on the camera for after this interview. I didn't want to stop and Mr. Petty's time is very, very valuable. But again, I'll try to show you guys while we're wrapping this up.
I can make this available to you as a PDF.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. So the presentation that we were kind of going through was the presentation that Mr. Petty had shown. I'm just trying to make sure every camera sees it. So, but what Mr. Petty will do is he'll get this presentation to Mr. Lawson, and Mr. Lawson will try to make this available to all of CoinOp so you can take in this history for yourselves. And lastly, I just wanted to try and get you guys a quick glimpse of the 1848 Charlotte gold piece and a quick glimpse of the 1838 Charlotte gold piece. Hopefully you guys got to see that because I am having camera issues. I will work on that after this interview. But folks, I want to thank Mr. Petty for his time. It's so gracious of you to go right from your presentation right out to here with us. We thank you, and we're so honored that you were able to spend some time with us.
And a shout out to you to get the word out.
Yes, sir. It's all about preserving our history and through numismatics and a love of our country. You've given me something on the side to think about. I'm also a huge collector of antique firearms, so now I'm going to have to look at the Beckler firearms and figure out, are there if any are still surviving and where they're at and what they were. You give me a lot to think about today. You've given a lot of the viewers to think about, and I just can't thank you enough, sir, for all the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you much.
CoinOp, Mr. Petty. If anybody has any questions, do you have another minute or so?
Sure.
If anybody has any questions for Mr. Petty, that you want to talk about the North Carolina Gold Rush, or you want to talk about anything we talked in the presentation, he's going to give us a few minutes of his time. So, John Francis, I couldn't agree. It was great. Ronald Harris said, thank you, Mr. Petty. Always wanting more silver. Thank you, Mr. Petty. Cosmic Creations, thank you both. You're welcome. Always wanting silver. Those are awesome. So, all right, go Green Hats. I don't know.
Green Hats is the motto for the Columbus, Ohio Numismatic Association.
Oh, all right.
People that volunteer at the show, we're all called Green Hats.
So Levy Adam or Adame must know a little bit about the Green Hats.
Know about us Green Hats.
That's awesome. Very cool.
We wear it on our shirt. We have.
Gotcha.
That's probably what you saw.
All right, guys. Well, if there's no questions for Mr. Petty, I'm going to let him go because he's been literally going from his seminar right to here and hasn't had a break. He's probably dying of thirst and whatnot. But like I said, he's going to try and get up with Mr. Lawson, get this PDF of this presentation available to you guys about the history of North Carolina gold and the Charlotte Mint, and little Conrad Reed finding a 17-pound gold nugget in a little meandering creek near Courtesy, North Carolina. All right, guys, thank you so much, sir. Very appreciative. One personal thank you to be able to hold the history and see it up close, share it with the viewers. to me, that's just, I'm honored, very honored.
A former collector, I'll just say one more nugget. A former collector that I knew that passed away, and I acquired one of his coins, wrote in the auction that he was a mere custodian of the coin, and he hoped that the next owner would take care of it like he did. And so I look at the coins the same way. I'm just a temporary custodian of them, and it's fun to share it with people.
That's amazing. I never would have looked at it that way, but that is an awesome and very humbling way to look at, that we are not only preserving history, but we are custodians of it, and it's our job to
take care of it,
continue to pass it on. So I have a new insight with my collection now, just because you said that. That's outstanding. Mr. Petty, thank you. It was a true honor. It was a real honor, sir.
Thanks for what you do.
Yes, sir.
Take care.
Have a good one. All right, Coin Op. That was Mr. Stephen Petty. He is from he's the president of the Columbus Coin Club. He came down to the Sharonville Convention Center for the Cincinnati Numismatic Association to do a presentation. Again, he had the entire $2.50 gold piece collection from the Charlotte Mint. It was unbelievable to be able to hold every single one of those in my hand. So yeah, that's where we're at. We're gonna take a quick 5. We're gonna, go get. I'm gonna try and find some coins for you guys to see.